Okay, this is how you're going to set up your paper for 1-point perspective. The first thing I want you to do is measure over 9 inches using your ruler from the bottom. Our paper is 18 inches, so 9 inches makes the halfway point. Then you're going to take and measure up 1 inch from that mark, and that is where we're going to put our vanishing point. So I go ahead and I make my dot right here. And if it helps you remember, you can put a little VP next to it to help you remember that's your vanishing point. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to measure down and mark where the top of our letters are going to start. So we need to create a guideline that will help us keep the tops of our letters all the same. So this guideline is going to fall 1 inch from the top of our paper. So I make a 1 inch mark from the top of my paper, move to the other side of my paper, and I make another 1 inch mark. Then I line up my ruler, make sure you're using one of the long rulers with those two guidelines. Sorry, I can't fit all this on the screen, but I line up my ruler with those, and then I take and I draw a nice straight line between those 2 points. And then I went a little off there, so I'm going to erase that extra. From this line, we need to measure down and add another line where our letters are going to end. So I made my letters 2.5 inches tall. You could make them 3 inches or 3.5. I would say 3.5 is probably the most you're going to want to go. So from this line, I'm now going to measure down 2.5 inches. So again, this is from the line you just made, not from the top of the paper. So I measure down 2.5 inches again. And again, I line up my ruler with both of those marks. And I make a nice straight line across my page. So now I have the top and bottom areas for my letters. I need to go ahead and create what spacing I will need for my letters. So I want to find the center of both of these lines. It will help me to center my name. So I go ahead and make a line on both of these lines, and then now I need to take and do some measurements. So to help you with the measurements and help make sure each of your lines or each of your letters have the same width, we're going to do a quick calculation. So I want you to write out the name that you plan on using. So here I plan on using my first name. I'm going to use the name Audrey. If I count that up, that tells me there's 6 letters in it. To find the middle, if I divide by 2, that tells me my name has an even number of letters, and that means that in between the 3rd and 4th letter is where the middle is at. So if I had the name Sarah, I would have 5 letters. If I divide it by 2, that gives me an odd number, 2.5. That tells me I'm going to have a letter in the middle. So because I have an even number, I'm going to start with a space paper to have my space in the middle. Now if my name was Sarah, I would start with a letter paper. So this is the width that I'm going to use for each of my letters. This is the width that I'm going to use for each of my spaces. So if you figure out you have a space, start with the orange. If you figure out that you have a letter, you're going to start with the black. Or if you have a longer name, you'll start with the red to make your letters just a little bit narrower. So again, my name has an even number of letters, so I'm going to start with a space. I line this up so the halfway point is right in the middle of this spacer, and I'm just going to draw a nice vertical line on either side of this. So that is my space between my D and my R. Now I'm going to take one of my letter papers and I'm going to make a line on either side of it. So this is my space for my D, this is my space for my R. And you'll notice that I'm marking my letters above the top of my spaces. I have had students that misspelled their name because they were so intent on making the letters, they forgot what letter they were on. So now I have room for my U. So here's my letter. Now I need a space, so I use the orange spacer. And this is a 1/2 inch measurement. That's what the orange space is. This black measurement here is 2 inches. for the letter width. So now I have room for my E. So I need to do that one more time. Again, I use an orange spacer to add the space between my letters. Then I add one more letter space. This will be my Y. And now I need to add my space for my A. So again, use my spacer, place my letter down. Now I have my letter space. So you'll see that it works out pretty well. If you have 6 letters, they fit pretty nicely on here. Now it's time to start making your block letters within each of these rectangles.